Have you ever been wandering around the world in Elder Scrolls, come across a cave filled with necromancers and undead, and wondered, why are they all in a cave? Of course you have. Me too, and that's what gave me the idea for this video. Why are people who practice necromancy confined to doing it inside caves and other similarly isolated locations? The answer for this is, of course, not as straightforward as you might expect. Indeed, necromancers aren't just introverts who need a little space from the world. That's exactly what this video will at least attempt to provide clarity on, though, by explaining the legality of necromancy within the Empire, as well as why necromancers can usually be found in these kinds of locations. This will be done in a few chapters. The first will be a brief introduction to necromancy as a source of magic in the Elder Scrolls universe, because there are some important things to note here. The second is going to be a walkthrough of the legality and history of necromancy through the ages within the Empire. This will give important context towards the third chapter. Speaking of, the final chapter is going to explore the question posed at the start of the video. What are the general views around necromancy within the Empire, and how does that play into necromancers making their homes in such locations? Before we start, I want to go over a few things really quickly. Firstly, I just wanted to thank people for the support on my last video about Ulfric Stormcloak. I had some really encouraging comments, and stuff like that makes me really motivated to keep going with and improving upon this kind of video formula. Again, any feedback you have for me on this video, please post it in the comments and I'll take it on board if I can. Another thing I wanted to note here is that I got an interesting comment on my last video and I want to address it. Vakapad9622 said this in the comments of my last video. Cyrodiilic is unlikely to have jurisdiction in Skyrim. Both Daggerfall and Morrowind are seen to have autonomous regional legal systems. It's a valid point to make, but I think a comparison between the Empire and present-day European Union could be made here. Within the Union, we can see treaties that have direct effect as a result of the Van Genden Loose Judgment. That's to say that EU law can apply to EU member states regardless of whether they have a national law to the same effect. When it comes to the Empire, the perfect example of this is the Talos ban as a result of the White Gold Concordat. Skyrim has no law against the worship of Talos, but the Empire does, and we can see this firsthand in Skyrim. To me, this suggests that Cyrodiilic does in fact have jurisdiction in Skyrim, regardless of the general freedom of legal autonomy that provinces of the Empire otherwise have. The last thing I want to say is, if you feel like this video was worth your time watching and would like to watch more of this kind of thing in the future, please consider liking, comment, and maybe subscribing too. Now, after all that, get comfy, fix your posture, grab a drink, and let's get into it. If you've played any of the newer Elder Scrolls games, you've probably actually seen and used necromancy at some point as part of your conjuration build. Interestingly though, necromancy isn't technically part of the school of conjuration. To elaborate, conjuration is a school that is characterized by its links to summoning items and creatures from oblivion. Conjuration deals with the white souls of lesser creatures that can be found on Tamriel and in Oblivion. Necromancy, however, deals largely with resurrection using black souls of mortals by capturing them and binding them into new bodies. Masters of this skill can then use these black souls to reanimate long-dead bodies, but generally speaking, the body that a necromancer wishes to bring back must be fresh. In reality, this takes the form of lesser necromancers raising skeletons from the dead, or even just raising dead bodies, all the way to the most powerful necromancers becoming liches and functionally immortal. People flock to necromancy for all sorts of reasons, such as a desire to see family again, or even in some cases using necromancy for benevolent purposes, but the most common reason is a pursuit of power. This claim is substantiated heavily in the next section, where the history of necromancy and its legality within the Empire will be explored. Despite this, it is important to stress that benevolent necromancy does exist. An example of this is Vestari, an Ultima Lich who has this to say about the evil reputation necromancers have given themselves.
No, not at all. Truth be told, necromancy is my primary area of expertise. The study of souls, to be more specific. I trust that won't be a problem. I'm sorry you feel that way, but truthfully, I don't blame you. We necromancers have a very poor track record when it comes to moral leadership. Even so, I hope that in working together, I can change your mind.
With that established, let's move on to a legal history of necromancy within the Empire. The origins of necromancy aren't exactly known, but in his book The Black Arts on Trial, Hannibal Traven attributes the origins of necromancy to before recorded time. What we do know about the very early days of necromancy is that it was forbidden within the Sigic Order, as it was deemed both dangerous and heretical. The first time that necromancy was legislated against in the Empire was during the reign of Riemann II. In his book, Riemann II, The Limits of Ambition, Hiking Emmerich says that, for long years peace prevailed across Tamriel, necromancy and Daedra worship were abolished. Trade flourished, and through the careful ministrations of Riemann II and his councillors, the Second Empire thrived. Moving a little further forward in time to Second Era 230, Vanus Galerian established the Mages Guild. In this unprecedented event, Galerian proposed to make magical items, potions, and even magic available to members of the public who could afford it. With access to potentially greatly destructive items and abilities comes great risk, however. It is because of this danger, and also Sigic doctrine, that Galerian would forbid necromancy to be used within the guild. The next relevant point in history takes part just before and at the time of the Elder Scrolls Online. This is a time period where so many historical events happen within such a short amount of time, a parallel to the 2020s in real life depending on your perspective. The starting point for this is the soul burst of Second Era 579. This is a whole part of the lore in and of itself, but as a quick explanation, the soul burst was an event that occurred when Manimarco convinced Varan Aquilarius to modify the ritual to light the dragonfires, in order to grant Aquilarius the blood of the dragon and be considered a legitimate dragonborn emperor in the eyes of Akatosh. In reality, Manimarco had spent weeks modifying the inscriptions on the Amulet of Kings in order to weaken the barriers between Nirn and Oblivion. In concluding the ritual, Aquilarius broke the covenant of Alesia that protected Nirn from Oblivion and caused a massive magical explosion to emanate from the Imperial City, which he was lost in. During the disappearance of the Emperor, Manimarco would assume control of the Empire and pin the blame for the soul burst on the Mages Guild, banishing them from the Imperial City in the process. In its place was the Arcane University, headed by the Stewardship of Anchorites, which was just a cover name for the Order of the Black Worm. Manimarco would subsequently expressly allow necromancy within the Empire again, utilising it greatly to his own personal benefit. Perhaps the most significant event of this time was the Dark Anchor above the White Gold Tower. This was Molag Bal's attempt to pull the Imperial City into Cold Harbour. Molag Bal also attempted this in numerous other places on the continent, and this event would be called the Plane Meld. At this time also, it seems reasonable to suggest that throughout the whole of Tamriel, there is some degree of illegality when it comes to necromancy. This is because when playing the Necromancer class in the Elder Scrolls Online, casting skills which raise the dead in towns and cities incurs a bounty.
Necromancer! Hide away the corpses!
Moving into the Third Era, the legality of necromancy would not change going forward. However, it would be banned in the Mages Guild, now back in the Imperial City under Archmage Traven. Traven would, in his book The Black Arts on Trial, draw heavily from Vanus Galerian's doctrines and reasoning. The abolition of necromancy within the Mages Guild saw the return of Manimarco once again, intending to destroy the Mages Guild in its entirety. This attempt would, of course, be thwarted by the hero of Kvatch. Between the events of Oblivion and Skyrim, the Mages Guild was dissolved and effectively replaced by the Synod and College of Whispers. At the time Skyrim is set, there's nothing to suggest that the Empire's stance on necromancy has changed. Of course, it must be taken into consideration that the Empire has had more concerning matters than necromancy between the Oblivion Crisis and Skyrim. Despite this, the Elder Scrolls Wiki suggests that by this time the body is considered as property within the Empire, and thus cannot be used without the consent of its owner. This is in parallel, and potentially based off of, academic arguments and judgments in the real world about the status of body as property. It must be noted that this is a huge topic and could be a video in and of itself, and no doubt it most likely is. Despite there now being statutory guidance in the Human Tissue Act 2004, this debate is heavily based in morals and ethics, and it is for this reason that it likely will not be put to rest for a long time. Back to necromancy though, it's because of this new doctrine that the final topic of this video can be explored. This brings the video back to the original question, why are necromancers always found in caves? Given all that the Empire has gone through in the past eras when it comes to necromancy, it's likely that people just have a dim view on it. This would explain the situation for Cyrodiil, but what about the other provinces of the Empire? This is an interesting question given the volatile state of the Empire in the Fourth Era, but let's start with Hammerfell. As a race, Redguards abhor necromancy due to their reverence for their ancestors. To this effect, there exists a group called the Ishabar, who have made it their calling to purge mausoleums and destroy the undead wherever they may be found. As for High Rock, its people generally abhor necromancy too. Despite that, the practice has plagued the land for thousands of years. A notable crisis was involving Angoth the Gravesinger, who in the Second Era led an offensive against Glenumbra, defiling Cathbadro in the process. Moving to Skyrim, in times of long past, the Wolf Queen Potema raised armies of undead and sent them against the Empire. Potema was vanquished in 3rd Era 137. After this crisis, it's likely the population would harbour a disdain for the practice. In modern-day Skyrim, though, the position is largely unknown. The College of Winterhold allows necromancy to be practiced there as a valid form of magic, as long as it's done discreetly. Contrary to this, though, many Nords abhor magic, and the college in particular, possibly hinting at their outlook on this practice. The book, Corpse Preparation, gives an idea of attitudes to the practice in Valenwood. It says, while few Bosmer perform Arce's rituals when burying the dead, the more primitive Bosmer still practice cannibalism upon their enemies, which reduces the number of available corpses. As would be expected from such backwards people, they have an intolerance of necromancy that goes beyond all reason. Finally, Morrowind has made the practice of necromancy illegal, although it's unclear when this was originally put in place. Regardless, the position of Morrowind is clear: necromancy is not tolerated. After having gone through the major players of the Empire's views on necromancy, generally speaking, it becomes more clear why necromancers tend to stick to caves and ruins in the wild. At the very least, all of these provinces share a disdain for necromancy and those who practice it. While it may not be illegal everywhere, it certainly is heavily disliked by the citizens of the Empire. Practicing necromancy in secret in the wild seems like the only way to practice within the Empire without the fear of incurring the wrath of both the population and the authorities. But who knows, maybe the necromancers really are just introverts after all. Necromancy is an ancient form of magic that individuals flock to for various reasons. Throughout the history of Tamriel, it's caused numerous historic events, or been used by those who cause historic events. Despite this, the Empire has not legislated against it for multiple eras now. This seems to be the case because the view of the provinces of the Empire, or former provinces, is at a point where necromancy is generally opposed everywhere. The point is, legislating against something realistically wouldn't be a priority if the population is already against that thing anyway. Of course, necromancy will still happen regardless of legislation, but necromancy, generally speaking, can only happen in seclusion at this point in the Empire's life, and that makes it both out of sight and out of mind. Anyway, that wraps up this video. Necromancy is an interesting subject and has a surprising amount of lore tied to it. This was fun making and I'm looking forward to creating the next video for you to watch. If you have any suggestions for a topic for a video, please comment them. Thank you very much for watching, and again, if you liked this video, please like and subscribe if you think it was worth your time, and maybe check out one of my other videos too. You can also find me on various social platforms that you can find on my channel profile if you want to join my community. But until then, see you in the next one.